The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Mercy General Hospital, casting gentle shadows across the polished floors of the intensive care unit. Dr. Benjamin Matthews made his quiet rounds through the corridors where hope and healing lived side by side, with uncertainty and prayer. At 32, Benjamin had dedicated 8 years of his life to medicine, choosing this calling not for prestige or wealth, but because his grandmother had taught him that the greatest privilege in life was to ease another person's suffering. Benjamin's brown hair was always slightly disheveled, despite his efforts to maintain a professional appearance, and his genuine smile had become a source of comfort for families navigating their darkest hours. He wore his white coat with quiet dignity, understanding that it represented not just medical knowledge, but a sacred trust between healer and patient. Room 314 had been occupied for 4 months by a patient whose case had captured the attention of the entire medical community. Clarissa Whitmore, a 29-year-old tech entrepreneur, lay in profound unconsciousness following a tragic car accident that had made headlines across the country. The Whitmore name was synonymous with innovation and philanthropy, and Clarissa had been hailed as one of the youngest female billionaires in America before the accident that changed everything. But in this quiet room, surrounded by the gentle hum of machines and the soft beeping of monitors, wealth and status meant nothing. Clarissa was simply a young woman whose body breathed with mechanical assistance while her mind remained locked in a place that medical science couldn't reach. Her blonde hair spread across the white pillow like spun gold, and despite the months of unconsciousness, there was something peaceful about her expression, as if she was simply sleeping deeply and might wake at any moment. The nursing staff, Sarah Chen and Maria Rodriguez, had grown attached to Clarissa during her long stay. Both women in their 30s, they brought not just professional competence, but genuine compassion to their work. Sarah, with her long dark hair, always pulled back in a neat ponytail, had been a nurse for 12 years and understood that healing involved more than just medical procedures. Maria, whose warm brown eyes reflected the kindness she'd inherited from her grandmother, treated every patient as if they were family. Dollar. Matthews. Sarah said softly as Benjamin entered the room for his morning examination. I've been noticing some changes in Clarissa's responses during the night shift. Nothing dramatic, but small things. Her eyelids flutter more frequently during REM sleep, and yesterday when I was adjusting her position, I could have sworn she squeezed my hand. Benjamin nodded thoughtfully as he approached Clarissa's bedside. He had learned to pay attention to the observations of experienced nurses, understanding that they often noticed subtle changes that others might miss. Have you documented these responses? Yes, sir, Maria replied, checking her charts. And there's something else. When we play music during her care, her heart rate seems to stabilize. Dr. Peterson thinks it's coincidental, but Sarah and I have been keeping track, and the pattern is consistent. Benjamin had always believed that coma patients could hear and process more than traditional medicine recognized. His approach to Clarissa's care went beyond the standard protocols. Every morning, he spoke to her as if she were awake, explaining what he was doing and why, sharing observations about the weather, and sometimes just sitting quietly beside her bed during his breaks. Good morning, Clarissa, Benjamin said gently as he began his examination, his voice carrying the same warmth he'd use with any conscious patient. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, and the sun is streaming through your window. I can see the park across the street, and the autumn leaves are just starting to turn. I think you'd enjoy seeing the colors. As Benjamin carefully examined Clarissa's arm, where an IV had caused some irritation, He continued his one-sided conversation. I'm going to change this bandage for you. The healing is progressing well, which means your body is working hard even while you rest. Sarah and Maria tell me you've been more responsive lately. That's wonderful news. What Benjamin didn't know was that Clarissa had indeed been aware for several weeks, trapped in a body that wouldn't respond to her desperate attempts to communicate. She had heard every word he'd spoken to her, had felt the difference between his gentle touch and the more clinical approach of other medical staff. In the frightening darkness of her condition, Benjamin's voice had become her anchor, his daily visits the only light in an otherwise terrifying experience. Clarissa had been fighting to wake up, struggling against whatever neurological barriers kept her consciousness separate from her physical responses. She could hear the conversations around her, understood that months had passed, and felt frustrated by her inability to let anyone know that she was still present, still fighting to return to the world. As Benjamin worked to clean and rebandage her arm, speaking to her with the same respect and care he'd show any patient, Clarissa felt something shift. The combination of his familiar voice and gentle touch seemed to break through whatever wall had been holding her captive. For the first time in months, she felt her eyelids respond to her will. Dr. Matthews, Clarissa whispered, her voice barely audible but unmistakably present. Benjamin froze, his hand still holding the fresh bandage, his eyes immediately focusing on Clarissa's face. Her eyes were open, blinking slowly as she tried to adjust to the bright room after months of darkness. The heart monitor began beeping more rapidly, but not with distress, with the rhythm of a mind suddenly reconnected to its body. Clarissa, Benjamin's voice, carried a mixture of professional excitement and personal joy that surprised him with its intensity. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I can hear you, Clarissa managed, her voice growing slightly stronger. I've been hearing you. Every morning. You told me about the leaves changing. Benjamin felt tears spring to his eyes as he reached for the call button to alert the other medical staff. But he never took his gaze away from Clarissa's face. How long have you been aware? Weeks, Clarissa said, trying to sit up slightly with Benjamin's gentle assistance. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. But I could hear everything. You were the only one who talked to me like I was still a person. The room quickly filled with medical staff as news of Clarissa's awakening spread through the unit. Dr. Elizabeth Peterson, the head of neurology, conducted a thorough examination that confirmed what seemed miraculous. Clarissa had emerged from her coma with remarkable cognitive clarity and minimal physical deficits. This is extraordinary, Dr. Peterson told Benjamin privately as the initial excitement subsided. In my 28 years of practice, I've rarely seen someone emerge from such an extended coma with such complete function. The family will be overjoyed. As word spread to Clarissa's family, and the media began gathering outside the hospital, Benjamin found himself staying close to his patient's side. The transition from unconsciousness to full awareness was often overwhelming for coma patients, and he wanted to ensure that Clarissa felt supported through the adjustment. Dr. Matthews, Clarissa said during a quiet moment when they were alone, I need you to know something. During those weeks when I could hear but couldn't respond, I listened to how different people talked to me. Most of the staff were professional and competent, but they spoke as if I wasn't really there. You were different. Benjamin settled into the chair beside her bed, the same chair where he'd spent countless hours talking to her unconscious form. How was I different? You saw me as a person, not just a medical case. You told me about your day, about books you were reading, about your grandmother who raised you. You made me feel like I still mattered, even when I couldn't contribute anything to the conversation. Benjamin felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. You did matter. Clarissa, you always mattered. Over the following days, as Clarissa regained her physical strength and prepared for discharge, she and Benjamin developed a friendship that surprised them, both with its depth and naturalness. Clarissa learned that Benjamin had chosen medicine after losing his younger sister in an accident, dedicating his life to helping families avoid the helplessness he'd felt during those final days. Benjamin discovered that Clarissa was nothing like the driven businesswoman he'd read about in magazine articles. She was thoughtful and curious, asking about his life and interests with genuine care, sharing her own dreams of using her wealth and influence to make a meaningful difference in the world. You know, Clarissa said one afternoon as Benjamin was finishing his shift, I've spent most of my adult life surrounded by people who saw me as an opportunity. Business partners who wanted access to my resources, acquaintances who valued what I could provide more than who I was as a person. But lying here these past months, unable to speak or move, I learned something important about human nature. What did you learn? Benjamin asked, settling into the familiar chair beside her bed. I learned that you can tell everything you need to know about someone's character by how they treat people who can't do anything for them in return. You talked to me, cared for me, treated me with dignity, when I literally couldn't give you anything back. That taught me more about your character than any conversation we might have had when I was conscious. Benjamin felt heat rise in his cheeks. I was just doing my job. Clarissa? No. Clarissa said firmly. You were being yourself. And yourself is someone who sees the person beyond the patient, who understands that healing involves more than just medical procedures. Do you know how rare that is? When Clarissa was discharged 2 weeks later, she asked Benjamin if he would have dinner with her. Not as a patient and doctor, but as two people who had shared something profound and wanted to explore where their connection might lead. I need you to understand something, Clarissa said as they sat in a quiet restaurant, far from the world of board meetings and business obligations. If you say yes to getting to know me better, you're signing up for a complicated life. There will be media attention, social expectations, people who will question your motives, simply because of the difference in our financial situations. Benjamin reached across the table and took her hand, the same gentle touch that had helped guide her back to consciousness. Clarissa, for the past 4 months, I've been talking to someone I thought might never respond, might never know that someone cared about her well-being beyond the medical requirements. If you're willing to take a chance on a doctor who drives a 10-year-old Honda and thinks a perfect evening is reading medical journals while cooking dinner at home, then I'm willing to face whatever challenges come with loving you. Their relationship developed with the same patient care that Benjamin had shown during Clarissa's recovery. They discovered shared values about service and making a difference, found joy in simple pleasures like walking through parks and visiting museums, and built a foundation of respect and genuine affection that had nothing to do with Clarissa's wealth or Benjamin's professional status. Clarissa, who had been temporarily cut off from active management of her companies during her recovery, found herself reevaluating what truly mattered in her life. Working as a volunteer coordinator at the hospital where Benjamin worked, she discovered purpose that went beyond profit margins and stock prices. More importantly, she found love that had nothing to do with business mergers or social advancement. You know, Clarissa said, one evening as they walked through the same park, she could see from her former hospital room. My accident changed my perspective on everything. I used to measure success in terms of company growth and market share. But lying in that bed, dependent on the kindness of others, I learned that the most important wealth is the richness we create through our connections with other people. Benjamin smiled, still amazed by the journey that had brought them together. Your grandmother sounds like she would have gotten along well with mine. She used to say that we never really know what gifts people carry until we take the time to really see them. She would have loved you, Clarissa said softly. She always told me that the right person would be someone who loved me for who I was when I had nothing to offer but my authentic self. During those months in the coma, you fell in love with me when I literally couldn't offer anything except the hope that I might someday return to myself. A year later, when Benjamin proposed to Clarissa in the same hospital room where she had first opened her eyes and seen his face, he said, I fell in love with you when you were unconscious, which sounds impossible, until I explained that I fell in love with the strength and resilience I sensed in you, the person I hoped you might be when you woke up. Getting to know the real you has been even more wonderful than anything I imagined. Clarissa accepted with tears of joy, saying, You loved me when I couldn't love myself, when I couldn't even speak for myself. You saw worth in me when I was at my most vulnerable. That's the kind of love that transforms lives. Their wedding was held in the hospital chapel, with many of the staff who had cared for Clarissa during her recovery in attendance. Dr. Peterson, who performed the ceremony as an ordained minister, spoke of love that begins in service and grows through devotion, of partnerships that honor both strength and vulnerability. Sarah and Maria, who had been with Clarissa through her darkest hours, served as matrons of honor, their faces glowing with the joy of witnessing their former patient find such happiness. The entire nursing staff had been invited, understanding that they had all played a role in Clarissa's recovery and the love story that had grown from those difficult months. You know, Benjamin said during his vows, I thought I was just providing medical care to someone who needed help. I had no idea I was meeting the person who would teach me that love recognizes no boundaries, that healing happens as much through human connection as through medical intervention. The Clarissa's response was equally heartfelt. Benjamin didn't just help heal my body. He reminded me that I was worth caring about, that someone could see value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. He taught me that the most profound healing happens when someone loves us not for what we can give them, but for who we are in our most vulnerable moments. The Whitmore Foundation, which Clarissa restructured after her recovery, became one of the most respected medical charities in the country, funding research into traumatic brain injury and supporting families during long-term medical crises. Benjamin continued his work at the hospital, though Clarissa's support allowed him to also pursue research that might help other patients find their way back from similar challenges. Their life together became a testament to the truth that love built on mutual respect and genuine care creates something more beautiful than either person could achieve alone. They established a program at the hospital that trained medical staff in the importance of treating unconscious patients with the same dignity and respect shown to conscious ones, understanding that healing often begins with being seen and valued as a human being. The most important lesson we learned, Clarissa often said when speaking to medical students, is that consciousness and worth are not the same thing. A person in a coma is still a person, still deserving of respect and kindness, still capable of hearing and feeling more than we might realize. Benjamin would add, we discovered that love isn't always about dramatic moments or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it's about showing up consistently, treating people with gentleness when they're at their most vulnerable, and believing in their worth, even when they can't advocate for themselves. 5 years after Clarissa's awakening, they returned to room 314 for the hospital's anniversary celebration of the brain injury program they had established. Standing in the room where their love story had begun, they reflected on the miraculous journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't woken up?" Clarissa asked, looking out the same window where autumn leaves were once again beginning to turn. "I think I would have kept talking to you every morning for as long as it took," Benjamin replied, taking her hand in the gesture that had become natural between them. "Because somewhere in my heart, I knew you were still there, still fighting to come back to us. And now? No, I know that the most beautiful love stories aren't always the ones that begin with love at first sight. Sometimes they're the ones that begin with someone choosing to see the person others can't see, to believe in someone when they can't believe in themselves, to offer kindness without expecting anything in return." Their story became part of the hospital's legend, a reminder to staff that every patient deserves to be treated with dignity, that small acts of kindness can have profound impacts, and that healing often happens in ways that can't be measured by medical instruments. The room that had once housed Clarissa's long recovery now bore a small plaque that read, "In honor of all the patients who remind us that the heart knows truths that medicine is still learning to understand." And in the park across the street, where autumn leaves continued their eternal cycle of change and renewal, young couples would sometimes walk hand in hand, unknowingly following the same paths where Benjamin and Clarissa had learned that love, like consciousness, can return to us when we least expect it, transforming everything we thought we knew about what it means to truly see and be seen by another human being.